Yes, spring practice is going on, but the NFL draft is right around the corner. The NFL Combine was last week, and have you thought about how the performances last week impact the players' draft stock, or if them not running the 40 means anything for them at all in the eyes of a draft scout? Well, we're here to discuss Stroud and Njigba, Paris Johnson, and the rest of the Buckeyes that were at the Combine and how that impacts where they might get drafted in the NFL draft. This is Locked on Buckeyes on a Feel Good Friday. Let's have some fun.
You are Locked on Buckeyes, your daily podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Buckeye fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked on Buckeyes, part of the Locked on Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jay Stevens, also the host of the Jay Stevens Podcast. It is Friday, March the 10th in the year 2023, and this episode is brought to you by our good friends at FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/Locked On today to get started. Some of you that are watching via the YouTube, you see a guest with us today. It's a guy that I've had on every offseason leading up to the draft. Ryan Roberts comes on numerous times, numerous shows to break down prospects, what their strengths are, their weaknesses are, and I try to get Ryan on as much as I can. The Combine was last week. He was there. He got to see players like Njigba and Stroud. So I want to get his take on what he saw and exactly how it impacts their draft stock and where they might land in the NFL draft. It's been a long time, so I want to introduce Ryan properly. Ryan, I want to say his own podcast, not really, but he also covers Notre Dame Fighting Irish recruiting, and he does a great job at it. Ryan, it's been a while, a little bit different introduction, man. How you doing?
I'm good, Jay. I'm good, man. It's I know it's been a little while. First and foremost, thank you so much for having me on as always. But it's draft season, man. So it's kind of the wind down period a little bit. We got pro days, obviously the top 30 visits for these prospects now, going to visit the teams, and it's going to be here before we kind of blink an eye, man. The end of April. So I'm excited for the end of draft season right now.
I'm excited for it too, man. I normally get excited for it, but I think this group of players for Ohio State, there are some that are extremely talented, some that need to work on some things, some that are maybe kind of in the middle, like we know what we think they can do, but then here's the film, and we think that they can do this in the NFL, but then once again, here's the film. I say that particularly for one player we'll talk about later on in the show, but this group from Stroud and Njigba, Paris Johnson Jr., Dawand Jones, all the way down to the DBs, even Luke Whippler, there's talent there, man. And I think the NFL scouts, NFL executives, they're going to be looking at Ohio State because some of these guys can fill a hole on an NFL team immediately.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you said it perfectly. I remember when we were doing kind of the preseason look forward to what Ohio State could have in the 2023 class. And, it was a lot of talents, but it was also a lot of development that was needed, right? But I think kind of looking, kind of in retrospect a little bit, as far as like with a little bit of hindsight here, Ohio State did a wonderful job from Jim Knowles and Justin Fry as the offensive line coach of really developing some of the talent that was there, but that needed to really take a step forward. And I think a lot of guys for Ohio State did take a step forward this year, which is why, we're sitting here and, it's not just CJ Stroud and Jaxon Smith-Njigba show anymore. It's like, these offensive tackles obviously took a big step forward. There's some defenders that are worth talking about, obviously. So I think a couple of the new additions on the Ohio State coaching staff this past year really did help develop this group that now Ohio State has in the 2023 class, where a lot of teams are really excited about them.
You talk about development, and I love offensive line play, D-line play. I love all of that. Paris Johnson Jr. really only having 1 year playing his true position of left tackle. Dawand Jones being a multi-year starter at right tackle. Those two guys specifically, that transition from right guard to right to left tackle is difficult. Being a multi-year starter in college, that's difficult too, because in your second year starting, those defensive coordinators or offensive coordinators, they're going to try to find your weakness. And once they find it, they're going to exploit it. But we saw this past season, Ryan, both Johnson Jr. and Jones take a great step up forward in their play. They're not perfect. I'm not going to say they're perfect, but they both, Ryan, took a next step in their development. And that's a testament to Justin Fry and what he did with the Buckeyes this past season.
No, it is. It is. And I mean, Justin Fry obviously had done great things at UCLA prior. So I expected him to do a good job, but he even got the wheels turning, I think, a little bit quicker than I thought. You know, I really thought that, look, Paris Johnson Jr. was a guy that everyone expected to be that guy this year, right?
Yeah.
With all, 36 plus inch arms, 6'6", 320, athlete. Like, he's a former 5-star. Everybody knows who Paris Johnson Jr. is. And I think he is the high favorite to be the first offensive tackle off the board. That's my opinion here. But Dawand Jones was a guy that, we've talked about, man. I was very lukewarm on Dawand Jones coming into the year.
Yeah.
And Justin Fry, I give him a lot of credit. He really got the best out of Dawand Jones this year, and he took a massive step forward. Then, Luke Whippler also had a nice little maturation, obviously, in first full year as the starter, like no questions about that, right? So, Justin Fry, I think, really deserves a lot of credit. He obviously had a lot of tools to work with guys like Paris Johnson and Dawand Jones, but in year one, man, I don't. If I'm an Ohio State supporter, I don't know how I have anything but optimism for what the future of the Ohio State offensive line is, because he really stepped in and got the most out of some really talented players this year.
Let's stick right there. This was not where I was planning on going first, but we're already with these two players and even Luke Whippler. So with these three guys and what they did at the Combine, the Underwear Olympics, okay, great. The guys running the 40, Ryan, I don't care. They're offensive linemen. I truly don't care. But sometimes I like the footwork. I like the lateral movement and the agility and how they look in pass pro and how quick they get off the ball and how do they look in pulling drills and things like that. I think all three of these guys could have made themselves a little bit more money than they were already going to get based off what they did in the Combine. I'll say it once, Ryan. I'll say it again. I think you agree with me. The Combine does not erase the game film. It can help you evaluate. It can confirm a lot of things, and it can bring up some questions, but it does not erase the game film. But Paris Johnson Jr., Dawand Jones, and Luke Whippler, I think they kind of showed what they were on film in the Combine, which really helps their draft stock and helps NFL teams really have a better idea of what these guys are as prospects.
Yeah, like you said, it's confirmation. That's what the Combine does. Or it's, hey, man, you might need to go take a second look if you didn't see quite the caliber of athlete that you saw on film, right? But, Paris Johnson Jr., he didn't need to test for me, Jay. Like, he didn't need to test. Like, I don't have any question marks about Paris Johnson Jr. from an athleticism perspective. It is pretty wild to think that we've had, I think, 5 players since 1999 that had 36-plus inch arms at the Combine, and 2 of them were playing offensive tackle for Ohio State this past season, man. Like, it's just wild to think about. But you saw Paris, he didn't do much tests, but then he goes to the field work, and he does all that stuff. You're just like, man, that kid's just such an easy mover, man. Like, he binds for arms, athletic, plays with good bends. I have no questions about that. Like, he can sit down and work against power. So he just confirmed everything I needed to see. Like, I just want to see him in field work. I want to see what the hips look like. I want to see what the feet look like. Everything checked out for me. Dawand Jones he's going to be such an interesting evaluation, man, because I already talked about it. He took a massive step forward in 2022, looked like a completely different player for 2021. But I still have some mixed feelings about him. Be completely honest about it, right? He is a massive dude, 6'8 plus, 375 pounds, 36 and plus some odd inch arms, 87 plus inch wingspan. That is just some ungodly numbers, man. Like, everybody wants to compare him to Bryant McKinney and Orlando Brown Jr. or Mekhi Becton. Like, he's literally longer than all those dudes. It's just wild to kind of look at, man. It really is. Like, he's an alien. Like, he absolutely is.
Yeah.
But there are some fundamental questions I have, like, he's one of those guys that he's going to be hard to get around in pass protection just because he's so massive. And he's got good foot quickness for his size. There's no doubt. But he's not a kid that bends incredibly well, right? Like, he's a little bit stiff in his hips, which you would expect for a guy that's 375 pounds. I was a little disappointed, I guess is the right word, this offseason when we went, because he had a really good first day at the Senior Bowl. Like, he played very well. But at the Senior Bowl and at the Combine, there was talk this whole past offseason that he had gotten down to 340-something, 350 pounds. Awesome. Lost a bunch of weight. I was very surprised to see him show up at both events at 375 pounds. You know, I'm just like, why are you 375 pounds if you were just 350 pounds, supposedly, right? Like, I still think he needs to cut a little bit of weight. I think it will help him. But ultimately, man, traits for days. There's going to have to be somebody that's going to be super comfortable with him, in my opinion, because he is a guy that is not going to be the perfect offensive tackle in, you know, true vertical pass sets, in being able to bend at the hips, to be able to counteract the guys that are a little bit twitchier, more outside track rushers. Like, some speed guys are going to give Dawand Jones a little bit of trouble. They are. But, I mean, he's a clear-cut second-round player for me now. Like, I think that he's a starting right tackle at the next level. There are some that are going to talk about in the first round, and he might end up going in the first round when it's all said and done. But I still think that there are some concerns I have. But, you know, Combine was not going to be his thing. Like, he ran 4.53 something in the 40. I'm just like, okay, like, I don't care. Like, that's not his game, you know. But, you know, again, he's had a really good offseason. He's had a good showing at the Senior Bowl. Combine was just fine. Like, you know, I didn't have any worries about it. I think one guy that we need to start talking about more, though, is Luke Whippler, man.
Yeah,
I think we need to start talking about him more. Jay, it's not a very deep center class this year. It's not. I mean, I love Ricky Stromberg from Arkansas. I think I'm a little higher on him than some NFL teams are, though, you know, to be completely honest. But you have John Michael Schmitz from Minnesota, who's a really good player. Joe Tippmann from Wisconsin, who's a really good football player. And then Whippler, I think, is in that top 4 in some type of order, right? Like, he has a chance to be a day 2 pick, in my opinion, somewhere second, third round. I really think he has an upside because what he has on film, and I think was kind of, you know, just affirmed with how he moved at the Combine, is my guy is a really gifted athlete at center, man. Not a big dude, 6'2" and 5/8, sub 32-inch arms. He's a little bit limited in his reach,
yes,
but he's a really good athlete, man.
Yes.
And that's what you want to see at those Combine events is guys that you think are really good athletes. You want them to look in space, in person, like really good athletes. So I think we need to start talking about all those guys. But Luke Whippler is one of those guys that I just think gets kind of flown under the radar a little bit because he's kind of the undersized center next to a couple mammoth dudes at offensive tackle. But Luke Whippler is a really good football player, man.
Luke Whippler's one of those guys that I was kind of hoping stayed at Ohio State. I was honestly shocked that as a center you come out early.
Yeah,
he's not going to be a first-round pick. He knew that when he announced he was going to go to the NFL draft, he wasn't going to be a first-round pick. But sometimes it may just be his time in college is done. Maybe he's done. Ryan, honestly, he might be tired of taking class, man. He might be tired of going to class, having tests and studying. He might be tired of all that stuff. I don't know, but that one shocked me. Also, guys, I don't want to get too deep into this without saying this will not be the last time Ryan and I get on the show to discuss stuff. I will try to have Ryan on down the road. Ryan, same stuff we've done previous draft cycles. Try to get more in depth, literally by position. So maybe a whole show for Stroud or a whole show for Njigba. Literally, all that news, all that stuff you want leading up to the draft and more specifics for these players. Speaking of those two guys, I believe it was Saturday, and I was actually busy on Saturday, but I got to watch a little bit of the Combine. Ryan, I was actually at to tell you a story. I was actually I was at my fiance's apartment for the weekend, and we went to a new restaurant. She was like, "Let's go out to eat." I said, "Okay, cool, like whatever." She lives in downtown in downtown inner town. You can walk to the restaurant, so we walked there. She's not a big college football guy like you and I. A person, she's not a guy. She's not a big college football person like you or I are. And so I think Combine. I think great. I'll sit on my couch and watch for 2 or 3 hours. It's not her cup of tea. But she's learned to watch and really enjoy watching the Buckeyes play. So when I said that Stroud and Njigba are going to be at the Combine, she was like, cool, let's watch it. We're actually at the restaurant while Stroud and Njigba are doing their drills on the field. She pulls up her phone, props up her pop socket. We're watching it as we're eating dinner that day. And let me tell you, as I'm watching it there, went back home to her place and watched some more of it, these two guys wowed me. It's also the same things we saw them do at Ohio State. In Njigba 2021, Stroud 2021 and 2022 in shorts, in a t-shirt, without a defense. This is what I expected from these two guys. And Ryan, the whole NFL world, if they didn't see them much in college, they got to see them on full display in Indianapolis. In their display of just catching the ball, accuracy, running routes, the quickness, everybody loved it.
Yeah, no, it was really I was really happy for CJ Stroud, especially, Jay, because everyone was just losing their minds over Anthony Richardson as a tester, right? And you're just like, I get it, man. Like, he's a fantastic.
Don't get me started, man. Don't get me started.
Fantastic athlete. But when it matters most, when they get to the field work of throwing the football, CJ Stroud stole the show. He did. You know, Bryce Young didn't throw. Will Levis was throwing. He was okay, but inconsistent. Anthony Richardson was okay, but inconsistent. Like, they both had some solid showings overall, but CJ Stroud was the best thrower on the day. Like, it was honestly very comfortable. It was, and I expected that, right? I mean, we've talked about Stroud in the past, right? There are some things I want to see him kind of improve on from a, working against pressure and using his athleticism more, because I think he has more athleticism than he plays to sometimes. But from a processing perspective, from getting through your drops, getting the ball out quickly and accurately, that's CJ Stroud's game, man. Like, that's what he is. He is the most accurate quarterback in this class. I think it's, him and Bryce Young are the two most accurate quarterbacks in this class, in my opinion. And you saw that during this day, man. Like, his ball placement is excellent. He's crisp through his drops, gets the ball out well, and he did exactly what he needed to do during this, because you knew CJ was going to interview well, because he's a great young man. Yes. You knew that. Both to the media side, both to the team side, that stuff was easy. He weighed in 6'3", 214 pounds, had 9+ inch hands, like everything checked out boxes on that end as well. But then seeing how clean and crisp he is as a passer, there's a legitimate argument that CJ Stroud might be the most NFL-ready passer in this class. It's either him or Bryce Young, right? Like, you're going to drop CJ Stroud into an offense in 2023, and he's going to be able to play early, and he's going to play good football, right? And that's kind of what you wanted to see during that event. So he reaffirmed everything I thought of him on film, he, as far as just the technical side and the understanding and the great eyes. Like, I think he has tremendous vision as a passer. All those things were on display in Indianapolis, and I think he just kind of verified everything you saw on film.
Ryan, I'm going to ask you a question about a guy who was the starter before Stroud was the starter at Ohio State.
Yeah.
You mentioned Stroud's accuracy. Justin Fields was a pretty good quarterback himself.
Yep.
Among these quarterbacks, Fields and Stroud, coming out of college, who would you say was the more accurate passer going into the NFL?
CJ slightly more accurate than Justin. I would say this, though. Justin was an accurate quarterback. The difference between Stroud and Fields, though, is that I think Fields just sees the game at a higher level as a passer than what Justin does, personally. I think Justin is a tick late to kind of see things sometimes, which leads to, to maybe putting the ball in a bad spot or, just being a little bit late on a route concept. CJ Stroud is one of those guys that's like, he sees it, man. He sees it, the ball gets out. And obviously, he's a very different player than what Justin Fields is. But I think both players are accurate. I would definitely give the nod to CJ slightly over him. I just think it's how CJ Stroud sees the game is at an advanced level, in my opinion.
So neither one of these two guys ran the 40. Was that a bad decision by them?
No, not really. I mean, for CJ, like, I don't care what his 40 time is. He's a pocket quarterback, It'd be nice to be a great athlete, but like, that's not his game, really. Like, he's a good mover in the pocket. I think that he is a good athlete, though. I feel like he can get out of trouble a little bit more, but him running a faster 40 than maybe some people anticipated, like, that wouldn't change my opinion, because I think he's already a good athlete on film that just kind of doesn't utilize it as much. Jaxon Smith-Njigba is a really polarizing, I guess is the right word, because he ran great short shuttle, great 3-cone. Historic times. Like, they weren't just good times. Like, they were historic times. And he looked incredible in the field work, running routes, going through the gauntlet, doing all that type of stuff. I think that Jaxon Smith-Njigba is exactly the player that we talked about in the preseason, man. I don't think his ceiling is incredibly high, but I think his floor is really high. I think he's going to be a really good slot receiver in a Keenan Allen type of vein at the next level. I think one thing that the not running the 40, though, does show you is that, and this is the case for most of these players, right? The guys that don't run the 40s are probably not going to run fast, right? Like that's kind of the point blank period to it. He is much more a quick guy than a fast, straight line fast guy. I expect him to run in the 4.5s, like 4.55, 4.56, like somewhere in that ballpark, which for a slot receiver is fine. It's fine. It's just his game is more predicated on precision, short area quickness, hand strength. All those things are exactly the same. So him running a 40 doesn't change my mind at all about who he is, because I think that is all along. I think that it is who he has been. He's not a guy that I think is going to be on the outside a ton, because I don't think he's going to be able to separate deep against one-on-one coverage a ton. I think he's an underneath, short to intermediate separator. There's nothing wrong with that, because again, my comp for him is Keenan Allen, who Keenan Allen has had multiple 100-catch seasons in the NFL. Like, he is a fantastic player. I think Jaxon Smith-Njigba has the same upside. It's just I don't think he's going to be a guy that's going to consistently win vertically, because I don't think he has incredible straight line speed.
If you guys want to go to Ryan on Twitter and get in his mentions and maybe say you disagree with something that he said, or maybe on this mock draft that I found, Ryan, I don't know exactly. I listened to the podcast, so I don't know the graphic if it was your pick or Joe's pick. But in the mock draft that Ryan and Joe DeLeon put together, they both co-host the NFL Draft Prospects podcast.
NFL Draft Prospect podcast.
Okay,
yeah.
Okay, I had a pro in there, but they had Stroud going second overall in the first round, and Njigba went 20 overall in the first round. Paris Johnson Jr. went 11 overall in the first round of the draft. Don't have time to go in depth to get Ryan's thoughts about that, but if you think Stroud should go number 1, talk to Ryan. If you think Paris Johnson Jr. should be top 10, once again, talk to Ryan. If you think Njigba should be top 15, talk to Ryan at Rise, the letter in draft on Twitter. Get a little Twitter plug in there for Ryan as well. Before we close the show out, Ryan, there's 3 guys that didn't do anything but talk to the media.
Yeah.
Ronnie Hickman, Cam Brown, Zach Harrison. I think all 3 guys could have benefited by doing something. Like, literally just do, even if it's just running the 40 and doing the agility stuff, just do something. Zach Harrison, he talked, someone from the media, I think Ohio State media, what do you think your 40 is going to be? Oh, I'm going to run fast. Cam Brown, run a 4.2. Didn't do it. I think Cam Brown and Ronnie Hickman have some questions. One with Cam Brown's durability. Ronnie Hickman, we've all seen the film. I think Hickman's not really the best in space. Yeah. Zach Harrison himself, I don't know. Is he going to be an NFL journeyman? Is he going to be a guy that's going to be a starter in the NFL? I don't know, because he progressed his last year at Ohio State, but it still wasn't enough for a lot of people, including myself, to be like that premier number 1 DN at a premier college. They didn't do anything. I think they could have helped themselves. They also could have literally hurt themselves by doing drills. What do you make of them not doing any on-field drills at the Combine?
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested to see what Zach does at the pro day, because the word was that he had some hamstring thing working. So like, sometimes that's BS. Sometimes it's legit. Yes. So like, we'll see. I think he's going to test well. So I think it's probably legitimate, because like, I think he was going to blow the place up as a tester honestly. So it was a little odd that he didn't test it. So I think that it might be a legitimate hamstring in that case. The other 2, man, oh, gosh, Jay. I really liked Cameron Brown in the preseason. I really did, man. I thought he was going to put it together this year, because I saw flashes in 2021, man, where I was like, there's some legitimate press man potential here. He just didn't get better. He's just always been banged up. I think he really needed to show a case of athleticism, because then someone could look at him and be like, you know what? It may have not been a finished product on the field, but like, I can bet on some of those traits on day 3. I can bet on some of those. So he has now put himself in a situation where like he needs to blow up the pro day. If he doesn't have a lot of film to back up, doesn't have great athletic testing, that's going to be a tough sell to a lot of teams. So he really has put a lot of emphasis on the pro day, but I still think he has some talent. So he might be a developmental guy, maybe late day 3 that you take a swing on, and maybe his best football is ahead of him. Ronnie Hickman terrifies me, man. I liked Ronnie Hickman's film. He's a really good box player, physical, scrappy, competitive, all those great intangible things, right? I love it. At the Senior Bowl, I thought he looked like he was running in mud a little bit, to be honest. And then he didn't test, and I'm like, oh no, is he going to run 4.7 in the 40? Is that about to happen, man? I think that there's a bad chance here that Ronnie Hickman maybe is just not a very good athlete. And if he's not, It's going to be a little tough, man. I think he'll still get picked day 3 because I do think his film this past year was good, and I think he's a very physical player, and I think that he'll go to an NFL team, and I think he'll compete on special teams, if nothing else. But if he's not a great athlete, in the NFL the way it is today, in such a heavy space game, you're really limiting yourself if you're not a great athlete. So I think he's a little bit of a tough eval right now.
Ryan, this is weird. And we're going to close the show out with this little thought. We got 8 guys get invited to the combine. All 8 went. We could be looking at a scenario that one of the guys invited to the combine is a practice squad player. I think Ronnie Hickman will probably make a roster, like a 53-man. Scratching and clawing, though, bro. Like, NFL preseason. You got less games than they used to have. You got to make everything count. Yep. And so I wonder if Ryan Day is going to use this moment to say we're never going to have only 8 guys get invited to the combine ever again. Now, granted, to the player's sake and Ryan Day's sake, a lot of guys stayed. Like, you had a lot of guys that stayed in school. So going forward, let's say Kyle McCord's a quarterback. Let's say he comes out, and then you have other guys that come out. Ryan Day can say, look, coaches, we're not going to keep developing guys like we have been. We got to develop guys better and more and make them better players. Because outside of really the 5 guys you talked about at the beginning, Hickman, Brown, and Harrison don't really excite me like you would think Buckeye players either at the DB position or the DM position do or will. So I'm excited about all these guys. I just can't wait to see when we get more in depth with Ryan down the road about these guys and their chances of being drafted in the NFL draft at the end of April. Ryan, love having you on, man. I really cannot wait for us to talk about CJ Stroud and get more of like a good 25-minute show about it, because that might be spicy, and I think Ryan and I will agree on something. I can't say what it is yet on air, but it does regard an Alabama quarterback. That's all I'll say right now. I've probably said it numerous times, but we'll say that for another show. Ryan, love having you on. That CJ Stroud show is going to be a lot of fun because as good as he is, from what we saw against Georgia, I wish you saw that every single game, man. I wish you saw him move like that every game, because he would be a different prospect. If you could, let everyone know where they can follow you on Twitter, listen to your show, and even maybe get some early look at Notre Dame as the Buckeyes and Irish play again this upcoming season.
For sure, yeah. So if you want to go on Twitter, it's Rise N Draft, the letter N Draft. It's also, with all my draft content, is at riseanddraft.com. Kind of keep everything as simple as possible. If you are interested, because Ohio State plays Notre Dame again next year, right? So if you're interested in some Notre Dame, kind of insight early on, you can go to irishbreakdown.com. And then I have the NFL Draft Podcast, obviously, on the Believe Podcast Network. That is called Believe in NFL Draft Prospect Podcast. So you can go over there and take a look at that, as we are about a month and a half away from the show to begin, man. So, Jay, I appreciate you for having me on, though, man. I always do.
Ryan, it's always fun. Guys, you can follow me on Twitter at jstevens07. Enjoy the weekend. The weekend's here. We got conference tournament. By this time, this is being recorded prior to the Buckeyes' second game of the conference tournament, so I am not sure if the Buckeyes at this time even won the game on Thursday, because it hasn't been played yet. But there's plenty of basketball to watch this weekend. Selection Sunday is literally a couple days away. Get ready to fill those brackets out, make a whole bunch of money, and then also spend the money on Buckeye gear to get ready for the Buckeye spring game on April 15th. I'm out of here. Hope you guys have a great day, and also enjoy the weekend.